My name is Rick Barcelos. I am the host of the Micro Lessons and a HubSpot specialist here at Growth. It's great to be back. Today, joining me, I have Kemmis, who is our Director of Revenue. She's awesome, and she's going to be talking all about signal to sale, buyer intent, turning that into revenue, all the nice things you guys are here to hear from her, not from me. So, Ember, it's all yours. Go ahead.
Awesome. Thank you, Rick. Now's the time where I share my screen. When I joined, I think I got to catch one or two of these micro lessons, and they were phenomenal. And I waited a long time to be a part of these. So I am going to present my screen. Give me 1 second while I do that. And we're going to talk today about signal to sale, turning hidden buyer intent into revenue. I am Amber Kemmis, and I am the Director of Revenue, as Rick shared. One thing to know about me is that I love revenue, as it shows in my title, but more than that, I love understanding buyer behavior and essentially how people are navigating the web, navigating different brands, researching things that they might be interested in. And so buyer intent is something that I'm excited to dive into now that HubSpot has brought it into its fold. I grew up in a world where, one, I was interested in psychology and almost went to be a psychologist. So my obsession with buyer behavior began then. But then fast forward, I spent a lot of time working with companies who were paying money for tools like Bombora and Sixth Sense. And the reality is, not everybody has a budget to do that. So, as I walk through today, I'm excited to share how HubSpot can kind of replace some of those tools, or maybe you're not using anything today, and it's a great way to get started with buyer intent. So let's jump into it. We've got about 25 minutes to jump through everything. The chat is open for any questions that anybody has. So feel free to drop questions along the way. I'm going to walk you through everything, and we'll leave lots of time at the end for Q&A as well. So the old way of marketing used to be looking at things that we can see in Google Analytics, we can see in our marketing platforms. We're essentially looking at, all right, what page views are people looking at, and what form fills are they filling out? And the reality is that not a lot of people are filling out forms anymore. We actually, if you go to our website at Growth Operations, you'll see that there's very few forms on our website. And that's because we believe in sharing and educating without the exchange of data in every scenario. We still use them sometimes, like if you register for this webinar. But as a whole, we have flipped our playbook to what is considered a new way of thinking. And the new way of thinking is not just tracking what we can see because of cookies. It's not just tracking the things that we can see because we got a form fill at one point. It's also tracking signals beyond what we can see in our SEO dashboard. It's tracking things beyond what we can see in our web analytics. And it's truly looking at the intent of companies, contacts, people to see if they're ready to buy, and how close are they to buying, and essentially tapping into the dark funnel to be able to market and drive revenue more effectively. So when we're thinking about HubSpot, buyer intent is a feature within the tool. It's available for any starter plans or above, with the caveat that there are some aspects of buyer intent that do require credits. The major distinction is that when you start to bring companies into your database or set up signals for companies that are already in your database, that's when you start to consume credits. So taking some very direct action from there. Otherwise, if you would just want to spy on the web and see who's looking at searching a keyword relevant to me, that's available with it starter plan or above. And essentially, it's the ability to prioritize which accounts have higher intent, personalize. Now, that part comes with a little bit of a separate feature, which we'll talk about in a minute. We can increase the deal velocity. We can look at who in our funnel is actually researching who we've worked with, the types of industries that we have serviced in the past, and can ultimately drive further velocity for our deal pipeline. And then I think the most powerful thing that buyer intent does, and of course, if you go to HubSpot's product page, you're going to see the buyer intent does a lot more than what I'm describing here. But these are the things that we can actually take action on and the impact they can have to revenue. And I think that one of the biggest things that it can do is it can align your marketing and sales teams. We used to talk a lot in the marketing and sales and revenue world about aligning marketing and sales. I feel like we don't talk about it as much as we used to. And the important thing here is that buyer intent allows us to sit down and do the homework we need to be aligned from sales and marketing, but also ensures that as companies are coming into our funnel, we're fully aligned on exactly who those people are, what are the intent signals that matter most, and it kind of forces you to have strong sales and marketing alignment. There's two components of the intent signals that happen in HubSpot. I'll give you some screenshots. We'll get to actually look at the tool. So if you're like, hey, stop showing me a bunch of words on a page, don't worry, we're going to get there. But there's two major differences between how HubSpot looks at intent. On the left-hand side, we can see that there's research intent. So research intent is people that are on the web looking for things that we maybe have no idea. They're not in our database, but we know that they might be spying on our competitors, or they might be searching for the services that we provide. With research intent, we can surface the companies, not the contacts. We'll talk about that a little bit more later. We can surface the companies that essentially tell us these are highly qualified people because they're searching for X term that we care about. So the dark funnel, the things we never would have been able to see if we would have had HubSpot a few years ago and didn't have other intent platforms that are available. And then on the visitor intent side, this is where we can start to see that a company, and then here's where it does break down a little bit on contacts when you have cookies stored. But first and foremost, at a company level, which pages on our site are they actively visiting? And you can essentially know that company X is looking at my services page, or company Y is looking at my my pricing page. And from that, we know which companies are going to be showing higher intent for certain types of pages. And when it comes down to specific companies, if those contacts live in your database already, you actually can have the ability to see which specific contacts viewed what pages. So it kind of bridges the gap between company, contacts, and getting a little bit more granular. We'll talk in a minute about how you actually build these things out. So any good setup, tech configuration is not going to be effective if we don't start with the why. It's really important that when you're setting this tool up, and I had the realization of this, we're a small team, our marketing and sales team anyways is mean and lean, less on the mean part, but we are very lean. And essentially when I go and see a new tool, I have the freedom to go and set it up, and I don't have a lot of aligning to do with sales because I am sales and marketing. But as I was setting up this feature, I had the realization that there was this necessary alignment that needed to happen with the rest of our leadership team, our service team, to ensure that we're setting it up in a way that's going to serve our needs for revenue. So starting with why is really important to that. And you can think about the why as what are our goals behind leveraging intent, and what are our strategic goals or goals. The cool thing is it has flexibility to serve multiple teams or multiple goals, but being clear of what you're doing is why you're doing it is really important. And that might mean I want to accelerate pipeline velocity. So then if I'm accelerating pipeline, I might be starting with companies that are already in my database and building out intent segments that are going to help me understand if they're actually engaging further in the sales process. If I'm creating net new demand, research intent is probably going to be a very valuable tool for me because I want to know what companies are searching for the problems that we solve. And they may not be on my radar yet, but I can put them on my radar. or I can put the company, ourselves, on their radar. And then penetrating new markets. I recently saw a LinkedIn post that did a good job of like explaining how somebody did an outbound strategy into a specific vertical. Shout out to Kristen if you're out there, about robotics. Now, she didn't use HubSpot specifically, but it did make me think about the value of, if you are going after a really specific industry or market, buyer intent is a great tool to do that, to understand who should I actually be going after and what are they searching. Because at the same time that I can understand what they're searching, I can also start to run reports on employee count, what does their tech stack look like, and I can fill in a lot of the gaps with all of that information. All right, so let's go through the step-by-step process. Step 1, beyond aligning on the why, when we're actually configuring, but this is a part of the why, is aligning on your target markets. So you're going to want to understand and create a workshop with your team to do this. Maybe pass around a survey or a worksheet. Maybe you already have this stuff documented. If you do, kudos to you. If you don't worry. It happens pretty commonly where this isn't all defined. But the first step is to configuring your markets is really defining what's your ICP, establish very clear criteria. What are the industries? Are there any geographic boundaries? Are there any exclusions, companies we don't want to target? What might be the typical revenue or employee count? What are some specific things within their industry? A great example of this is I've worked with a lot of healthcare companies in my career, and healthcare is so broad. And it could be, on one hand, it might be the pharmaceutical company or the medical device company that makes pacemakers. Or on the other end, it could be your go-to urgent care provider, right? Very different audiences. One's B2C, one's a lot more B2B. And within the target markets, you can add additional keywords that help you narrow in on education, healthcare. So if I only want to go after in the education industry, I only want to go after people who do higher ed, I can add that as a keyword so I can be a lot more granular in my target markets. Making sure that you're aligned with across the team is a critical piece of this. And then ultimately, when you start to, what you might want to do is pull up this screen that you see on here and start to define this with your team with all the parameters on the page. Revenue is going to be in there, but use it as a guide for that alignment discussion. Next is high intent. We saw on this last screen, part of that intent criteria is defining what pages and how many times they view those pages is actually going to matter. This is playing into visitor intent. One of the coolest things that intent does is it can suggest pages for you. It can say, hey, these look like they might be high intent pages. But if you want to take a step deeper and you have revenue attribution in HubSpot, something that you can do is use a revenue attribution report to break down pages or page titles by URL that lead to the most amount of revenue. And you can slice and dice that different ways, right? Maybe your healthcare vertical is very different from your education vertical. Look at those reports through different lenses. And also different attribution models so that you can start to see which pages actually do signal high intent. And then this is sometimes the obvious, sometimes not, but we're not looking for which pages are bringing in the most amount of traffic overall. We're looking at what is actually driving conversions. And if you have revenue data, great. Use revenue data as an idea of what high converting means. If you don't have revenue data, that might be like, what got somebody to an SQL and what converted them to that point. If you can only get that far, that's sufficient. But don't focus on high volume, focus on conversion. And then you can identify intent heavy assets. So maybe you don't get a lot of web traffic today. Maybe it's not enough data or you don't have attribution reports built out. That's okay. You can think about what are some of the common things that people look at when they're further down the funnel and they're indicating high intent. pricing pages, feature comparisons, you versus them, competitor information, what's the process like when it comes to implementation. All of those can indicate that somebody is is further along in their intent journey. So part of the beyond the visitor intent, part of research intent is understanding what are some high intent keywords. We're going to go a little old school SEO style here. One thing that hasn't changed with human behavior is that people still, whether they're going to Chat GPT or they're going to Google search, people still are indicating their level of intent with how they talk about things. And so on the more informational side of an example, we might have, what is a CRM? They're not even thinking about a CRM. Like maybe they're not even comparing Salesforce versus HubSpot. They just don't even know what it is yet. It's very informational. As you move through the buying journey, keywords like HubSpot features overview is going to show a little bit higher intent because they're now digging into features. And then we keep moving through the funnel to see that eventually you might get to something really transactional, like what is a pricing for a HubSpot elite partner? That's going to indicate very high intent. And one of the things that I love about the buyer intent tool, and specifically research intent, is that it will tell you if people are actually searching that or not. And that way you're not picking things that are too long tail to actually get data, but are specific enough that it's going to indicate how invested somebody is overall. All right, let's pop to this next section. Now that we've visited SEO, it's been a long time since I've talked about keywords in a presentation, so bear with me. I feel old school, but it's still very, very relevant. From there, we want to create some segments and essentially views within buyer intent. So the way that this might look, I'm just going to show you an example here, is that we might want to create a segment or a view that essentially shows us what companies are in a specific vertical. We can look at topic interest areas. So here you can see that I have HubSpot as a very broad term versus HubSpot Elite Partner. It might indicate they're looking for us or our competitors. I can group those two companies or those types of terms together, because later on in a minute, we're going to talk about how you follow up with people. But essentially, someone looking for a HubSpot Elite Partner versus someone looking for one of the other terms we track internally is data enrichment. They might have slightly different needs and might need slightly different follow-up. So grouping based on the research term is great, but also industry is another way of looking at it, or even by engagement level. Who's like very highly interested, and that might be shown in a combination of research. You can see like the color here. How are they very specifically looking? Are they actively looking and showing a lot of high intent, or also using in combination with that the visitor intent? So how often, like, are they actually coming onto our site and they're researching our competitors? That's a hot lead right there. And you may want to group them together. All right, let's define our signals. So HubSpot very recently added what's called signals. We all, I think, gave this feedback. At least I did. Maybe I was just extra loud. I don't know. I'm sure you all shared it as well. And that buyer intent, when it first came out, research intent was great. Like, but how do I actually action this? How do I take these signals or this intent and actually turn it into a revenue generating activity? Signals is how HubSpot did that. So essentially, I have all these companies that are popping up in that screen like I just saw in the previous, but now I need to tell my reps, or tell myself, because I'm the only rep here, that this person should be on my radar. Or we're going to talk about automation a little bit. How do I use like the prospecting agent to follow up? And there's a few different ways that you can think about this. One, keep in mind, when you start to add those companies into your database, they are going to consume credits. It's a small amount. I think it's 10. So personally I add a lot, and I never go surpass our threshold. So the likelihood of you hitting that is pretty slim. But you ultimately are going to want to signal to reps or action somehow. And so you have to define, what are those rules of engagement? Does it mean that as soon as somebody researches something on the internet, we're going to be a stalker and go and find everybody in that company that might be interested in our solutions and do cold outbound outreach to them? Like, maybe not. That might not be the most effective or like best use of your time, depending on your company and your availability and resources. But maybe I want to look at people who are showing that they're viewing our pricing page and they're also researching for our competitors. And we also know that we have existing contacts at that company that we've engaged with in the past, and that's our signal for following up with them. You have to define what those rules are and what makes sense for you all. And that's kind of a combination of going back to sales and marketing. How's marketing communicating? How are you going to avoid bombarding somebody? What's the overall communication strategy? And so signals are a great way to sort of marry sales and marketing, decide on how you notify and action people as they're coming into your intent view. So this is my favorite part: automate and activate. Easier said than done, obviously, but one, we can basically automatically add contacts when they're in our database or companies into segments. When we do that, one thing that you can do is you can trigger sales notifications, let people know via Signal, this company showing high intent, you better get after them. Or maybe even automate a task and sequence creation. For us, we love AI and we love the power of AI outreach. And I'm the only sales rep. So for us, it's important to not have manual follow up when we see somebody with super high intent coming in. And we can use a prospecting agent, as you see in this workflow, to basically do the outreach for us. So I'm not having to go and manually enroll somebody in a sequence, send them a one-to-one email template. Still can be personalized using the agent, but it allows me to take, somebody who's high intent and actually automate them into a prospecting agent using a workflow. The other thing that can be done here is pulling them into segments and using that with ads or remarketing. So if you're using ad roll or any sort of ad technology, this is where you can pull into segment. Maybe you have the companies, but you don't have the contacts, but you know that the target person at that company is a COO, as an example. Now I can start to say, hey, I want to target on LinkedIn anybody who is a COO, works at the company that showed high intent. And hey, by the way, I have research intent. So I know that they were researching project management tools. And so now my messaging can be aligned. I can get in front of more people and the right people who I don't have to convince them about a change or making a move. They're already thinking, or at least somebody in their company is already doing that. My second, I probably have like a million favorite things about this tool, but maybe my second favorite thing is sort of going back to what we just talked about. We're going to know who the companies are. We do not always know who the contacts within that company are. And this is where it's really powerful to combine with a tool like Apollo. I dare say ZoomInfo. We use Apollo here, but you can use HubSpot's free enrichment. So let's say we do add a company into our database from buyer intent who's not already there. HubSpot's going to give us free enrichment, help us see what their tech stack is, what's their location. We get some data there, but what we might not get are who's in the buying group, who are the key contacts that I need to be getting in front of at this particular company. And that's where integrating a tool like Apollo can be really powerful in helping to enrich where you know there's already high buyer intent. I'm going to give you a quick little example here that's not specific to us. I kind of feel like I just gave away a lot of like our tips and tricks of how we look at this for our own marketing and sales. But let's say you're trying to expand into the healthcare vertical. This would look like setting your specific ICP criteria, for example, health systems, med device, digital health startups. Then going a step further to say, hey, we want to find people who are looking for HubSpot for healthcare CRM, HIPAA compliant marketing automation. And then we can even track some competitor signals. Are they looking for Salesforce, HIPAA compliance, for example, and use automated workflows to create vertical specific nurturing. And if they're already in your database, this might mean that you're focusing only on those in your database and enriching them based on intent there. Or it might mean that maybe you have a BDR who's notified and starts to use workflows to enroll people and engage them, and maybe does some like LinkedIn navigator outreach type of thing. Of course, with everything, continuously reviewing your goals of the campaign, what's working, not working is a critical part, and then going back and optimizing it and changing it. I think we've changed our buyer intent tool like 3 or 4 times over the course of the year. Part of that is HubSpot's made updates, so we want to keep it fresh. But part of it is just what's working changes. So we're constantly optimizing it ourselves. Few common pitfalls: not having a goal alignment up front. We already talked about that. Overloading your signals without prioritization. I learned this one the hard way. Turned on way too many signals, and suddenly I'm like, all right, slow down. I can't actually follow up with 20 people every single day. So let's reduce that noise and ensure that we're only prioritizing the people that really truly matter, or the companies that really matter. If you are not a salesperson and you're watching this, definitely continuously ask for a feedback loop. And that might be in the form of a weekly or monthly sync, but it also might be using this in conjunction with the lead object, for example, or a field on the records to say, yes, this person was qualified, or no, this person's not qualified. This isn't helpful. And then you get that structured data around whether or not this is working. But either way, close that feedback loop, ensure you know what's working and not working. And then make sure one of the biggest questions I get around using credits is like, how do I measure the ROI? Is it working? HubSpot has a really cool dashboard, so you can see how many HubSpot credits you're using every month, and because you're tracking revenue and you're tracking, maybe you might even tie this all to a campaign. You'll have the ability to say, this is how many credits it consumed, the equivalent cost of that, and here's what we got back from it. And I don't want to guarantee, because you might have some really bad salespeople. I don't know. I hope not. But I feel very confident that if you do that tracking, you're going to realize that the concern around credits goes away, because you're seeing a very direct ROI. And the good thing is it doesn't use a credit all the time, only when you actually want to pull those people into your CRM or action on it. So lots of things to keep in mind and pitfalls to avoid. Here's a quick digestible recap and playbook. Make sure you use buyer intent to know who's ready, align on your goals up front. Automation's huge here. All of these tools were great. Now having the ability to segment and activate them is super powerful. It's the most powerful thing that I've learned from the tools. Continuously measure ROI, and at the end of the day, like, ensure that those turn into true ROI. One of the ways we do that is we use a lead object, convert them into qualified opportunities, and that gives us the ability to ensure that it's driving revenue. All right. That is all I have out of the deck. This will be available on demand, I believe. And I saw lots of chats as I was talking, so I'll leave a few minutes to answer any of those chats.
Yes. Thank you, Amber. That was amazing. That was really fantastic. By the way, yes, this will be available on demand. So if you registered, everybody will receive the recording early on Monday. And then, of course, if you want to reach out to Amber, ask questions around this, she's always open to having great conversations. So am I, everybody from our team. Thank you, Chai, for saying that you love the session. We did some questions throughout the session, so maybe we can get to them right now. Let's see here. Heather has asked, or she said, My technical CEO needs help deciding on moving from 3 years in ConnectWise to HubSpot or Zoho to help drive sales for his solution integration business model. Do you have insight on comparing these HubSpot with on comparing HubSpot with Zoho? It looks like Zoho also has intent signals now.
Yeah, I would say I my most of my experience has been moving people off of Zoho. I have had some clients where I've served them on Zoho in the past, and I think the number one thing that pushes people from moving from Zoho to HubSpot is and you like the ability to use it effectively. Signals in itself are only valuable if the user experience is easy to navigate. And for example, like that workflow I showed earlier of like doing a prospecting agent afterwards, that was made possible with an AI agent that created it for me. I didn't have to click a bunch of buttons and say and know exactly how to run a workflow. So generally, Zoho loses to HubSpot because it's not as user friendly. But would happily love to look into your use case, Heather, if you want to hit me up afterwards. I love comparing tech.
Me too, especially because HubSpot always wins. uh, the other question in our chat is from Renata, and she asked, "How does AI play into the buyer intent conversation in HubSpot?"
That's a great question. I think there's like two elements of it. When we think about user behavior and how it shifted with AI, um, those research signals come from multiple places, including AI. So on the front end, if someone's showing intent, we know that that's coming from a myriad of channels. So it plays in there that it's not missing the fact that more people are going to chat gpt and doing research. And then on the back end side of it, there's a couple things like the recommendation for which pages to use in intent. Those are powered by AI. And I think the most powerful piece of AI is the actioning afterwards. So when I go and use, essentially, if I know that somebody is a high intent company or contact and I want to do more research or follow up on them, that's AI at its best in HubSpot. It's the AI creating the message, it's doing the research. I don't have to do much manually at all. It's AI.
We love that. And let's see, I think that covers the questions that we had. If anybody else has any more questions just before we jump, you can feel free to drop them in the chat. Otherwise, again, you will get the recording and you always have the opportunity to reach out to Amber or I through LinkedIn or any of the other means. Amber, that was an amazing lesson. I really appreciate you for presenting this our comeback micro lesson. So everybody can look out for some more episodes to come. It's going to be a great time. And if nobody has any more questions, then Amber, is there anything you want to say before we turn off here?
No, thanks for letting me be a nerd around HubSpot today, Rick.
We do have another question. How can I sign up for recurring events? I will take care of that for you, Chai. Don't worry about it. I'll make sure that you're signed up for all of our other micro lessons so you're getting notified about them.
Awesome. I'll put me on the list too, Rick.
Will do. I got y'all. Don't worry about it. With
All
that,
right.
though, I think that does it for this episode. We'll see you guys in the next micro lesson, and thank you for coming.
Bye, Al.